until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered, why did they leave you, but you're the one left shattered, and they seem just fine? Why are you the one who wakes up to memories, battles with longing, and tries to piece yourself back together, while the person who once laid beside you now acts like you never existed? You think they don't feel, that they escaped you. The truth is, avoidants don't escape. They avoid. They avoid feelings. They avoid confrontation. They avoid the truth even when they're the ones who walked away. They don't call, don't check in, don't explain, and you assume their silence means closure. But don't be fooled. Silence is not closure. Silence is a survival strategy of someone who has never learned how to face themselves. And if you walk the right path, not the path of chasing, begging, or posting quotes they'll never see, but the path of growth, self-respect, and quiet strength, you become the mirror they can't look away from. And that's when guilt begins to speak. They didn't leave you because they didn't love you. They left because being too close made them feel like they were disappearing. Avoiding emotions isn't a sign of coldness. It's a survival strategy, one that often comes from never learning how to stay in closeness without losing oneself. To an avoidant, intimacy, even with someone they love, feels like a slow erosion of their autonomy. It's not, I'm afraid of you. It's, I'm afraid of who I become when I get too close to you. So they leave. They call it freedom. They call it doing what's best for both. They convince themselves that ending the relationship will fix the inner unrest. That itch, that suffocating tension, that sense of being emotionally held hostage. And for a moment it works. They feel relief. That first breath after a long emotional fever, psychologists call this separation elation, the euphoria of reclaiming independence. They might even feel proud, empowered, clear. But then what? That peace, it's not real. It's like sitting in a silent room where all the doors are locked from the inside. No one's calling you, but you can't hear your own voice either. Slowly, they begin to realize, I'm still not okay. The emptiness they blamed on you, still there. The discomfort they thought you caused, still quietly pulsing in them. There's no one left to blame, no one left to avoid. And that's the first moment, small but powerful, when the mind begins to fracture. Not enough to make them run back, but enough to hear a faint echo, their own voice. And you don't have to chase them or teach them a lesson. You just have to keep walking along the yellow brick road, not back to them, but toward the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime running from. And in that exact moment, when the avoidant first hears the faint echo from within, something strange begins to happen. They start remembering, not remembering you, but remembering the feeling that once made them walk away. This time, though, there's no one left to blame. And so the guilt journey begins not with tears, but with a very familiar pattern. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill, the emotional loop humans fall into, chasing comfort but ending up in the same emotional place. Avoidants often believe that if they can just get away from what feels suffocating, they'll finally feel peace. They believe that freedom is the cure. And at first, it feels like it is. The first few days, no texts, no expectations, no one asking, where are you? No late night arguments, no emotional weight in the room. They breathe easier. They tell themselves, this is me again. But that feeling doesn't last because the source of their discomfort was never you. It was their own nervous system, their own avoidance patterns, their own inability to stay close without feeling like they're losing themselves. And now that you're gone, now that they can no longer say you're the reason they felt trapped, they're left with the real question, why do I still feel this emptiness, even now that no one is holding me back? The freedom they idealized suddenly loses its sweetness, that subtle loneliness, that restless itch under the skin, that sense of emotional unease. It's still there, and now they have no one left to blame. This is where they're hit with the terrifying truth. I didn't leave you because you were wrong for me. I left because I don't know how to handle myself in love. And the first seed of guilt is planted quietly, without drama, but strong enough to shake the foundation of the narrative they once used to keep their conscience intact. As they begin to realize the emptiness never left, another layer of mental defense begins to crack. But that realization alone, quiet, internal, isn't enough to break through their emotional numbness. It takes something external to make it real. And then one day, they see you. Maybe it's on social media. Maybe it's in passing. Maybe it's a photo you didn't even post to get noticed, but it stops them cold. You're not the person they used to know. It's still your face, but with a different light behind your eyes. Still your posture, but with a quiet strength they've never seen before. No passive-aggressive captions. No, look what you lost messaging. You're just living, growing, no longer dependent. That's when their brain triggers a very primal psychological response, the before and after effect. Humans are wired to recognize value through contrast. We don't just evaluate someone based on who they are now, but how much they've changed. And true transformation, not the curated, performative kind, hits hard. In that moment, their mind can't help but run counterfactuals. If I had stayed, would I be standing beside this version of them? Did I just walk away from someone I didn't even fully understand yet? This isn't fleeting admiration. It's heavy regret. Not about your appearance, but about your presence. They no longer recognize the person you've become. And the worst part, they once had you, and they were the one who let it go. The greater the distance between who you were and who you are now, the harder the psychological blow hits. Not because they suddenly want you back, but because deep down, they know. I once had someone like that, but I wasn't mature enough to hold on. After the emotional blow of seeing your transformation radiant, calm, and no longer seeking their approval, the avoidant doesn't just feel regret. They begin to feel disconnected from themselves because throughout the relationship, you weren't just a partner. You were a mirror, one that reflected the best version of who they believed they could be. You saw in them a person capable of love, of depth, of responsibility. When they shut down, you stayed. When they doubted themselves, you looked at them with belief. You saw a higher version of them, sometimes more clearly than they could see themselves. And even if the avoidant never said it out loud, they relied on your reflection to believe they were good enough to be loved. But then something shifted. You stopped idolizing them. You set boundaries. You no longer saw them through the same soft lens. You became wiser, clearer, stronger. And with that, the mirror cracked. They didn't just lose you. They lost the positive self-image they had when reflected through your eyes. Now, when they look in the mirror without your gaze to hold them together, they don't see the person they once thought they were. They see a version of themselves that feels raw, insecure, and unmasked. And quietly, they begin to think, I used to be a better person when I was with them. Now, I don't even recognize who I've become. It's a very particular kind of loss, not just the loss of love, but the loss of a self they only knew how to be when they were with you. After losing the version of themselves they used to see reflected in your eyes, the version they quietly leaned on to feel like someone worth loving, the avoidance starts to feel something they've been running from. Accountability, not the kind you asked for when you were together, the kind they can't escape now, no matter how they spin the story. You see, avoidants are often good storytellers. In their version, they were calm. You were emotional. They were reasonable. You were too much. They didn't leave out of cruelty, just incompatibility. They walk away clean. No betrayal, no screaming, no mess. Just, we weren't right. And in that story, they get to play the part of the good guy, the one who left quietly with clean hands. But then you don't play your role. You don't beg. You don't lash out or spiral or send them angry paragraphs they can screenshot and use as proof. You don't fall apart in a way that gives them an excuse. Instead, you walk away with calm, with dignity, with self-respect, not as a weapon, but as your foundation. And that's what shatters their entire narrative. There's nothing in your behavior to blame. No emotional chaos to hide behind, just their actions laid bare with no shield. And for the first time, they have to face the uncomfortable truth. I have nothing to hide behind. And I was the one who did this. And it's a moment of awakening that doesn't come with fireworks, just a quiet crumbling of a carefully constructed self-image. No one else to carry the guilt, no more illusions to fall back on. Just them and the weight of the choices they can no longer justify. When their I'm not the bad guy narrative begins to collapse, the avoidant enters one final phase of resistance. Not apology, not reconciliation, but total emotional shutdown. Psychologists call this the ostrich effect, based on the mythical idea that ostriches bury their heads in the sand when threatened. Avoidants do the same. except they bury themselves in emotional numbness. They mute you across every platform. They avoid the streets, the cafes, the places where memories live. They skip songs the moment the first note triggers a flashback. They scroll past anything, even a name that might remind them of you. But avoidance isn't erasure. It's not healing. It's just postponing pain while that pain quietly builds pressure. From the outside, it might look like they've moved on, like you're just a ghost they've long forgotten. But memory doesn't die. It gets compressed, like a pressure cooker with no release valve. And then one day, something random happens. A face that resembles yours, a scent in the air, a laugh, a song, boom. Everything they thought they'd buried erupts. Like the heartbeat in Pose, the telltale heart, thudding louder and louder beneath the floorboards of their mind until it can no longer be ignored. At this point, it's no longer the whisper of guilt they hear. It's the thundering pulse of regret. Not because you forced them to feel it, but because they did this to themselves. This is the moment they realize you're not around to make them feel guilty anymore. You're not blaming them. You've moved on, but they in their own mind can't forgive themselves. When the echoes in their mind grow too loud to ignore, when you're no longer someone who triggers emotion, but someone who quietly reflects truth, one thing becomes clear. You don't have to make them feel guilty, because guilt never came from you. It comes from their own unresolved inner world. And that's the most powerful part. You don't need to manipulate. You don't need to post vague quotes or curated photos to say, I'm doing great. You don't need to grab their attention so they'll finally wake up. You just need to live, but live deeply and intentionally. Live as someone who is returning to their truest self. Do the therapy. Build emotional discipline. Reclaim your values, your self-worth, and the dreams you paused for someone who wasn't ready. You're not doing it to prove anything. You're doing it because you deserve to live as your full self. And here's the irony. It's that quiet, grounded evolution, the one with no agenda that ends up confronting their conscience more than any accusation ever could. That's how you activate each point on the yellow brick road. Not with regret, not with clinging, but simply by doing the one thing most people are afraid to do. Grow. If there's one truth to take from this entire journey, it's this. You were never powerless. Even when they left, even when they went silent, even when it felt like they walked away without a second thought. The truth is they didn't escape. They avoided the mirror, the intimacy, the reflection, the accountability. And in doing so, they unknowingly walked themselves into a guilt they can't shake, not because of you, but because of what your absence reveals. But this isn't about whether they come back. This isn't about making them suffer, because healing that depends on someone else still leaves your power in their hands. The real journey? It's you walking that yellow brick road, not for them, but for you. Every step you take toward therapy, growth, wholeness, boundaries, reminds your nervous system that you are no longer at the mercy of people who fear depth. You're not here to prove your worth to someone who couldn't hold it. You're here to become someone you respect in the mirror, even when no one's watching. Because when you heal for real, you don't need closure. You become the closure. And when they finally hear the echo of what they lost, it won't be your pain they feel. It'll be their own capacity for love that they never gave themselves a chance to learn. So let them spiral if they must. You rise.